become a meteorologist, you have to be good at, or at least like, three things. Number one, you have to like weather. That's kind of obvious, because it's in the job description. Meteorologist basically means weatherman. Actually, what meteorologist means is a person who studies things that fall from the sky. Anything that falls from the sky is technically called a meteor. I know, when you think meteor, you think big giant rock, flowing through the atmosphere. No, technically anything, such as raindrops, or pieces of dust, or snow, are things that fall from the sky. And so because we study those, we're called a meteorologist. So the first thing you have to like is the weather, and that's pretty obvious. The second thing you have to like to be a meteorologist is math. Who likes math? Okay, now I need some teacher participation in this for a second. Teachers, I want you to raise your right hand. Okay, all the teachers, raise your right hand. I want you to put it over your eyes, like this. Okay, keep it over your eyes. Students, how many of you don't really like math very much? Keep those hands over your eyes. Okay, put your hands down, put your hands down. Okay. One of the cool things about math is the only subject where you always get a right or a wrong answer. You see, 1 plus 1 always equals? It never equals 3, right? No matter how hard you try, 1 plus 1 is always going to equal 2. And frankly, the farther up you get in school, that's pretty cool, because you always have a right and a wrong answer. There's no wiggle room on any questions. So math is really cool because of that, and it's one of those subjects that builds as you get older. So if you learn math now, you'll continue to stair-step and learn a lot of math. And we take a lot of math classes to become meteorologists, because obviously we deal a lot with numbers. So you have to like weather, you have to like math, and the third thing you have to like to be a meteorologist is science. Who likes science? Okay, put your hands back in. If you're one of the guys or girls that doesn't really like science, I have another question for you. Do you like asking questions? I bet your mom or dad would say yes. Grandma and grandpa, what? Yeah, we ask questions, right? Well, being a scientist is just asking questions. You see, that's the first step to be a scientist. It starts with someone looking out the window and going, why is the sky blue? Silly question, right? Sorta. You know the answer to it. How about the 5th graders do? Do any of the 5th graders know? Is that something you study? No? Okay. Well, the reason the sky is blue, it has to do with the sun. The sun's light is made up of radiation. That's what the sun is. That's why you feel it. You stand out in it and it's hot. Well, the shortest wavelengths get absorbed by a layer of the atmosphere called the ozone layer. And as the sunlight passes through that, it refracts and it's absorbed, and it causes the blue hue that you see up in the ozone layer. The shortest wavelengths get blocked out. Well, the reason the sky changes color in the evening, it goes from yellow to orange to red, is because only the longest wavelengths are able to make it all the way through the atmosphere, because there's more atmosphere for them to go in when they're coming the long ways through it. So that's the reason the sky is blue, it's the reason it changes colors, and that's the reason why science is just all about asking questions. Gravity was a question. Why do things fall? Well, because there's gravity. We know that because someone else already answered that question. So if you like asking questions, you might have a knack for being a good scientist. So to become a meteorologist, you have to like those 3 things: weather, math, and science. There's a lot of all 3 to become a meteorologist. When I was your age, I was scared to death of tornadoes. By show of hands, who doesn't really like tornadoes? Okay, oh yeah, you can put your hands down. When I say scared to death of tornadoes, I'm talking, I was a tornado siren goes off, hair stands up on the back of my neck, and I run! and you know what you're supposed to do here at school. You do tornado drills, right? You get down, funny ball, right? I was so scared of tornadoes that my brain would shut off. I lived across the street from tornado siren. We're talking from here to the back of the room away from a tornado siren. So when it goes off, it's loud. And so from the time I was this tall on until I was probably in the 4th or 5th grade, when that siren go off, I didn't know the tornadoes were around. I just knew that's a really loud noise, and I didn't like loud noises. So it scared me just because it was loud, and so I'd run to the basement, and rather than getting the funny ball, I'd up against the wall. And if I'm really, really thin, the tornado won't find me. And obviously that's silly, but that was my fear talking. It was just my first instinct to do that. So as I got older, my parents worked with me, and we actually did tornado drills at home. And that might seem kind of silly too, but I'll tell you what, the older I got and we did more tornado drills, the more okay I was with tornadoes. No, I didn't want one to strike me, but I knew what to do. And in knowing what to do, I was a lot less scared of tornadoes. So how many people in here have done a tornado drill at school?
The government requires you to do tornado drills, so I already know all that.
Okay, wait a minute. How many people in here have done a tornado drill at home? Okay.
Government doesn't require you to do tornado drills at home.
So not many people have done it. I want you to promise me something tonight. Will you do this for me? I want you to do a tornado drill with your parents at home tonight. And that might seem silly. I get that. I mean, there's no tornadoes. It's obviously the clearest day it's been all week long. So why would you do a tornado drill today? Well, you do a tornado drill for practice, because you want to know before a tornado strikes where to go. So, okay, first step in doing a tornado drill is knowing where to go. So here at school, it's really easy. The teachers tell you exactly what to do. Go in the hall, get in the funny ball position. They might say it just a little bit different. But you know where to go because your teachers tell you where to go. And you go to the middle portion of the building, which is the hallway. And the reason for that is that adds as many walls between you and the outside as possible. You see, when a tornado comes toward you, if it were to strike the school right now, what it does is it probably hits the trees out front first, maybe picks up a car down the street, and it brings that and tries to hit the building with it. You see, people don't get picked up all Wizard of Oz style. Who's seen the Wizard of Oz? Okay, so tornadoes coming to you, the likelihood of it picking your house up, carrying it in the air, and then gently setting it back down is about zero. Not completely zero, but highly unlikely. So the way a tornado is going to get you is if it picks up cars or trees or buildings someplace else and tries to boop, hit you with it. Now let's be real honest. If something hits you in the head, is that, doesn't feel good, does it? Who's hit their head before? Who never wants to hit their head again? That's usually the way that goes if you've happened before. So, when it comes to tornadoes, you want to stay as far away from something that can hurt you. Those things we call that hurt you, we call that debris. It's whatever the tornado's picked up someplace else. So here at school, you go to the middle of the hallway because it puts two very sturdy walls between you and the outside, reducing the likelihood that the tornado is going to hurt you. So you want to, if you're at home, do something pretty similar to that. So what is that? Well, you want to go to the middle of your house on the lowest floor. How many people have a basement at home? Okay, a few people. I'll keep my hand down because I don't have a basement at home. How many people have a storm house at home? Okay, a few more. A storm shelter, maybe another underground storm shelter they have to go outside to get into. Okay, we have a few more that have those. If you can go to below ground areas, you're going to be in the best shape. Because tornadoes are the strongest right at the ground level and a little bit above ground. So if you can get below ground, even a 200-mile-per-hour wind from a tornado might only be 40 or 50 miles per hour. Now listen, that's still windy, but it's not 200 miles per hour. NASCAR going around a racetrack, is it? No. So you want to go to the middle of the lowest floor of your home if you don't have a basement and put as many walls between you and the outside as possible. So if you have a window in your room, is that a good room to be in? No. Because windows, really easy to break. How many people in here, maybe the teacher shouldn't let this one, have broken a window before? I know. Maybe a baseball, a golf ball. It seems like you're always playing a sport or doing something you're told not to do when you break a window. That's what happens to me. But windows are very easy to break. So you want to go to a room that has no windows in it, but toward the middle of your house. And sometimes that's a closet. How many people maybe have a coat closet in their house at home? Most people, okay. Sometimes the closet's on the outside wall, but if it's on an interior part of the house, maybe a closet, it's sometimes a hallway at home too, that might be your safest place. But you want to go to that middle place, and you want to take the blankets and pillows from your bed. You know why? Because even the smallest girl or littlest boy can take the blankets and pillows off their bed and carry them into the hallway. And if you wrap up in those, you'll protect yourself even more from what a tornado could try to bring into your house. Because most people get hurt from tornadoes are not prepared for them. You see, they're just outside going, let's tornado! I can't believe it hurt me. Listen, they're looking for you. The tornadoes are, so you do have to be prepared. So you don't want to go outside, number one. You never want to chase a tornado. Even though it looks fun, doesn't it? I'm telling you, if you haven't learned about it in science class, eventually you'll learn about something called natural selection. The teachers think that's funny. Anyway, if you go chasing tornadoes, you might not live to tell the story. Some people do, some people don't. So if you want to stay inside, you want to stay out of a car, because cars are really, really easy for tornadoes to pick up. You see, a tornado's winds can get under a car and pick it up kind of like a kite, or actually, more like a plane. See, 200-mile-per-hour winds getting under a car will pick it up, carry it away, maybe miles, maybe only a few feet. But you know what they say about flying a plane? Anybody can fly a plane. Not everybody can land one. You can't really land a car. So, cars, you want to stay out of those when the tornado is coming toward you, which means you want to get in your safe place, inside a sturdy structure, inside your home or a storm shelter. And the second thing that you want to probably get out of if the tornado is coming toward you is if you live in a mobile home, you probably want to find a better place to live. And a better place to be safe. 360 days a year, a mobile home is a great place to live. It's a really good structure, even when there's thunderstorms coming. Normal thunderstorms are just fine if you're in a mobile home. But when it comes to tornadoes, most people who get hurt from tornadoes are either outside, they're in a car, or they're in a mobile home. And so when we come on the air and say, there's a chance this evening we could have some tornadoes possibly moving through the northern part of Mississippi, we need you to put your plan into action now. The reason we're saying that is we're saying in that situation, you might want to talk to your mom and dad about maybe staying at your grandma and grandpa's house if they have a storm shelter, or a friend's house, or an aunt and uncle's house. Because most people who get hurt from tornadoes are in a mobile home, car, or outside. In those three situations. If they're in a storm shelter, if they're in school, they live through even the worst tornadoes. They usually live through those. So tonight, you're going to run a tornado drill at home. Where do you go at home? You know now? In the middle of the house. Where else might you go? In the basement. Okay. Or in a closet. And in any of those situations, you know that there's a safe place at home. So tonight, I want you to you might not grab the pillows and blankets off the bed this time. Mom and Dad might need to remake the bed. I don't know about you. I'm married. My wife makes me make the bed. That's like 20 minutes of... Who likes making a bed here? Let's be real honest. There are like 5 people who like making a bed. So, we won't take that this time. But if there's a tornado, you want to grab those blankets and pillows. You want to go to that closet, that hallway, that basement, wherever your safe place is. So will you do that with me tonight? Talk to your parents about that? I mean, I don't have to show you one thing tonight. Let's try that one again. Will you do that for me tonight? Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. Even though it's sunny and clear outside. I'm originally from Kansas. I grew up and went to school in a town of about 3,500 people. So a little bit bigger than Tishomingo, but not a very big town by any stretch of imagination. So the only thing we had in Kansas growing up was oil, we had wheat, and we had weather. And so that's part of the reason I became a meteorologist. So before I moved to Mississippi, I grew up in Kansas, went to college in Kansas, and I spent 7 years as a meteorologist in Texas before I moved here. And one of the interesting things I find about living in the South is everyone loves snow. Who likes snow? Now this is going to be disappointing to you, but believe it or not, most times, during the winter time, this time of year, if it's raining outside and it's kind of cold, it's actually snowing. What? No. But it's not snowing right here. It's snowing up there. You see, most times when it rains, a nice gentle rainfall during the winter time, at the level where the cloud is, that's actually starting out as snowflakes. It's starting off with snowflakes that are below freezing, and then, as they fall, the temperatures warm up, and they change over to raindrops. So believe it or not, it snows probably 10 times as many times during the winter time around here than we actually get snow at the surface. Isn't that sad? But that's the challenge in forecasting snowfall. Is this the 1 out of 10 times where the temperature is just cold enough, or that snow actually cools the atmosphere enough to get the snow to the surface? It's a big challenge. And it's a really hard part about being a meteorologist, is trying to figure out, is this one of those times? And so we use a lot of equipment to be able to determine that, as well as storms and all the other parts of our forecast. One of the things we use is we actually send up weather balloons. Not me in particular, but meteorologists send up weather balloons all over the country 2 times a day in about 50 places around the country. And those weather balloons go really, really high up in the atmosphere. We're talking like 20 miles up in the atmosphere. So they start at the surface as this big balloon that might be the size of that little white lattice thing there, and by the time it pops, it's bigger than this entire room. And the reason that happens is the higher up you go in the atmosphere, there's actually less pressure, which means you could actually jump higher. If you had something to jump on. Gravity still keeps you pretty high down, but the higher up you go, those balloons actually get big, and they pop, and then the little sensors fall back to the surface, and we reuse them again and again and again. But that's one of the ways we measure what's going on up above us, because let's be honest, where does the weather come from? Is the rain start here at the surface, or does it start up in the cloud? So that's one of the hard things about me being a meteorologist, is we don't really get to sample what's going on up in the clouds quite as much as we obviously sample with temperatures and thermometers. I bet most of you have a thermometer at home. So we measure what the temperature's like at the surface all the time, but unfortunately we only measure what's going on up there 2 times a day. And that's a lot of the reason why our forecasts sometimes aren't right, or sometimes aren't perfect. You see, forecasting is a big part of my job, and it's the hardest part, because every single forecast I've ever made is wrong. Yeah, I'm always wrong. My wife likes me to say that too, I'm always wrong. But the reason I'm always wrong is it's impossible to make a perfect forecast. You see, when we show the 7-day forecast, we say it'll be 66 degrees tomorrow afternoon with mostly sunny skies. I think the rain change will be in the morning, diminishing by the afternoon. I just said one line that's supposed to cover 25 counties, which means about a 120-mile area north to south, east to west. Well, one temperature isn't going to cut it, because it might be 66 degrees right here at the school, and you go home and it's 65. So technically I'm wrong. So, one of the things you have to get used to if you're a meteorologist is used to people telling you, you're wrong. Yes, I'm wrong. Appreciate it. But that's the fun part. So, I have a question for you. Do you have questions for me? We'll try, because I know some of the 5th graders have been studying weather, and hopefully some of the other classes have thought up a couple of questions while we're going along. So I want to make sure that we can call on some of the questions to get a variety of different topics to talk about. So if you have a question, the teacher's going to help me select who we're going to talk to. Go ahead. What's your name? Yeah.
What was the most dangerous storm you've ever seen?
Most dangerous storm I've ever seen. When I was in Texas, I tracked a thunderstorm that produced 10 tornadoes. Now, most of them were very weak tornadoes, brief tornadoes. When I first started off in Texas, I was the morning meteorologist. And at our television station, we have 5 meteorologists. I do the evenings to kind of manage everybody. And we have a morning meteorologist whose name is Kara James. So I worked Kara's shift there. And so when we had severe weather, especially in the afternoons, I would go out and I would storm chase. So we could spot and say, okay, this thunderstorm, you're looking at it on the radar, now it's producing a tornado. So one thunderstorm that we were tracking ended up producing about 10 tornadoes. And the reason I rated it as the most dangerous is we were a little closer than we should have been. And the thunderstorm put down like a half-mile wide tornado, about a half-mile away. Fortunately, we were the right half-mile away from it, but still, it was a bad tornado. Fortunately, though, it didn't end up really hurting anybody. So I say it was dangerous because I was closer than I should have been to it. And one of the things about my job is most times when tornadoes are forming, they have me in the station, at the station, so I can talk to folks at home as opposed actually being out and experiencing it. Fortunately, I've never had a tornado hit my house or anyone I love, but they've been pretty close. Yes? It's actually lower. The pressure in a tornado is actually lower, and there's a couple of reasons for that. You see, as the air is coming in very quickly, it sucks in toward the middle of the tornado. And when it gets to the tornado, it can't go into the ground because the ground's hard, let's be honest. But it's kind of soft if you go up into the atmosphere, right? So it gets forced up into the atmosphere very, very quickly. And because it's rising so quickly, as it's circulating in, it causes very, very low pressure. And so that low pressure is part of the reason why the tornado forms in the first place. It's also part of the reason why, when you're looking to try to spot a tornado, the clouds are actually a little bit lower on that part of the thunderstorm. And they're formed lower because of that lower pressure. They're able to form quicker as the air is rising. And that's also part of the reason why sometimes you'll see the funnel cloud before the tornado touches down. But a tornado, by definition, is a rotating column of air caused by a thunderstorm that makes contact with the ground. It's a lot of words to basically say that tornadoes can happen even if you can't see the whole tornado there. Because sometimes there's just a little whirl up in the cloud, but it's still causing damage at the surface. You can see through the body. It's kind of an eerie situation. It doesn't usually happen here because we have a lot of moisture here, but it happens a lot out in the plains. So not every tornado you can see. Which is the reason why if we say
There's a tornado one in effect in northern Tishomingo County. You stay in the same place.
so we want you to go to a safe place, because we don't know if this is one of those times where it's going to be really hard to see.
No. An eye of tornado is the worst place to be.
You see, what you're thinking of, and it's, listen, every time I do one of these school talks, I usually get this question. The eye of a hurricane is the safest, well, maybe not the safest place to be, but there's a calm factor when you're in the eye of a hurricane. And that's because the eye of a hurricane is where there's actually air that's descending down out of the whole complex of thunderstorms that makes up a hurricane, and so it's actually where the weakest winds are. So you'll have very weak winds in the eye of a hurricane, and might even clear up for just a couple of minutes. But then you go to 100-mile-per-hour winds as the hurricane moves toward you. So right in the middle of it, you're safe. But in the case of a tornado occurs on such a smaller scale and moves so much quicker that if a tornado is moving 60 miles per hour, you might be in the eye of the tornado less than a second. So if you were sustained in the middle of a tornado, there's a lot of research being worked on as to whether or not it is calmer in the middle of a tornado. But a lot of times it's very difficult to do that research, and you would only be in that calm for a second or two at most. And even then, it might still be 60, 70 mile per hour winds with stuff flying around trying to in the head. So good question. Special type of thunderstorm. See, tornadoes form in what we call a supercell thunderstorm. A typical thunderstorm goes from a cloud that's developing to producing lightning and thunder, a lot of heavy rainfall, and then fall apart in about 45 minutes. That's a relatively short life cycle. But a supercell thunderstorm can live for 6, 7, 8 hours. Typically they don't. Typically it's an hour and a half to 2 hours. But they can last a long, long time. And so these supercell thunderstorms can very rapidly produce a tornado. But the way they do it is because the entire thunderstorm is rotating. You see, to get tornadoes to form, we can't always say that this particular thunderstorm is going to produce a tornado. We have correlations, but that's a big part of the reason why we have storm chasers and why we have storm spotters is to say and to confirm to us, yes, this tornado is occurring right now, and we verify it in the tornado warning. But to get a tornado to form, you have to have a supercell. And to get the supercell to form, you need basically 3 ingredients. And think of it like cooking up a bad storm. Ingredient number 1 you need is a lot of moisture. Moisture acts to fuel thunderstorms. And so, similar to the way your parents' car needs gasoline so it can drive down the road, thunderstorms need moisture so that they can happen. So you need something to cause the thunderstorm. That's the second thing. We call that a trigger. That trigger could just be very fast winds aloft. It could be a front, maybe very cold air hitting very warm, moist air at the surface. There's a lot of things that can trigger thunderstorms. But that acts kind of like the ignition switch on your parents' car. So they have gas in the gas tank. They turn the switch, and the car starts up. That's how you get thunderstorms. The last ingredient, and this is sometimes tricky, is you have to get the thunderstorm to rotate. And what starts that thunderstorm rotating is something meteorologists call shear. And it basically is just a difference in wind. You might have winds that are out of the south at the surface, but they're out of the northwest aloft. And that difference in wind direction causes the whole thunderstorm to start rotating. And if you get those three ingredients, you're going to get spinning thunderstorms. And then those spinning thunderstorms have spinning updrafts, and where things are going up in the thunderstorm, if that part's spinning and it's spinning fast enough, it can produce tornadoes very quickly. You can go from having a thunderstorm that's just showing signs of rotation to producing a tornado in under a minute. That tornado can lift back up in a minute or a few seconds, or it might stay on the ground for hours. That's one of the tricky things, is knowing, are the ingredients right for long-lived, what we call long-track tornadoes, or is it likely what we call spin-up tornadoes, where they produce a brief tornado that might only be down for a few hundred feet and only a few seconds. So there's a whole variety of lengths that a tornado can be around, and that's the reason why we have to take everyone seriously, like it could be a really bad one, because you don't know until after the fact this is going to be a really, really bad tornado. We know the ingredients are there, but they don't know what to produce. It's like trying to make a cake and just not being a very good baker. We know we have the right ingredients, we're just looking for the right amounts. If you're in a bathtub and it's not on the outside wall of your house, and you don't have windows in your bathroom, then yes, it's a good place. Now, if you have windows in your bathroom, no, because you want to add more walls between you and the outside if you can. So every house is different, and that's the reason I can't say always get in the bathroom or always get in the closet, because I haven't been to your house. Well, I've been to your house in the form of being on TV, but I've never actually seen the inside of your house. Yes. I became really interested in weather when I was growing up. When I was probably, one of my earliest memories of like bad weather, we had some F5 tornadoes that touched down in Kansas when I was 8 or 9. And they killed a lot of people. And I'd always been, before that, I'd always been scared of tornadoes. We'd watch the video on TV, and I remember watching the meteorologists and thinking, maybe I could do that someday. You know, I want to help people someday. And so that's one of my more vivid memories. I was interested in weather before that, but I think that's the first time it occurred to me, maybe that's something I should do for a living. Then I got to high school and decided I was going to be a lawyer. And then I got to college and realized you had to take Spanish. And I'm not good at foreign languages, I'm good at math. So I became a meteorologist. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, you need lots of warm, moist air, something to start them, and then lots of strong winds in the atmosphere. Leave off the last one of those, and it's possible to get a hurricane. See, if you have lots of moist air and something to get it started, you're going to get thunderstorms. In the case of a hurricane, you want to it obviously has to start in the middle of the ocean. And so it'll start as a big flare-up of thunderstorms in the middle of the ocean. But as long as there are no winds around to mess it up, that blow up of thunderstorms will actually take on a life of its own day after day. And so initially it'll start off as just a little blow up of thunderstorms. And then as it collapses, it'll kick out cool air, and that cool air will spread out and cause more thunderstorms the next day. And that cool air causes more thunderstorms the next day. And it starts this process where it's continually this blow up of thunderstorms until it gets so big that it starts to rotate. And the reason it starts to rotate is because the Earth is spinning. And if something is big enough, then that spinning motion of the Earth will cause it to rotate. It's something we call the Coriolis force. And so that flare-up of thunderstorms, as it gets bigger and starts to rotate, if there's no wind to mess it up, it just starts rotating faster and faster and faster to the point where it produces 50-mile-per-hour winds. And 72-mile-per-hour winds, that's when it becomes a hurricane. And then faster and faster winds, where in some cases it can have winds in excess of 150 miles per hour, because nothing has disrupted it. But as soon as a hurricane encounters friction of any kind, maybe winds aloft that are strong, or land, trees, then it will slow down. But because it's out of the ocean, and the water is relatively flat in comparison to the hills and trees like we have around here, the hurricane's able to spin up really quickly when it's over water, and then it dies, not always quickly, as it encounters land. The only time I can think of that I was scared when a tornado was around, there was one going toward my parents' house about 6 years ago. And I was not on TV to where my parents could see. And so I was looking at the radar, and I realized that's going toward my parents' house. So I called them up, and I couldn't get a hold of them. I got a little scared. Most times when we're forecasting the weather, we're talking about tornadoes, one of the good things about going through as much schooling as I've gone through, and I've had a lot of practice talking about tornadoes, is it's not something I usually think about. I'm always focused on, as opposed to being scared or worried, I'm focused on trying to get as much information out as possible before the tornado forms and before the tornado strikes. After the fact, when we had all the tornadoes about 2 years ago, I remember it was about 2 days later I sat down and it was just one of those, oh, if my wife had been here, if that had hit my house, and all of a sudden all that fear came, and I was like, oh geez, how lucky did I get personally, on that. So for whatever reason, I've been fortunate enough that that's the only situation where I got scared while it was happening, and it's because I couldn't control it. I couldn't get a hold of my parents. I couldn't tell them that it was coming toward them. But they were fine. The tornado ended up missing them. But my dad tells a story where he's looking out the window. It's one of those things he's looking at and he's like, that looks like a tornado. And he finds himself staring at it for about 10 seconds. He goes, that's a tornado. And then they take off from the basement. Because, let's be honest, who's seen a tornado on TV before? I think almost everyone here has seen a tornado on TV or a picture in a textbook, but very few of us have probably seen one in real life. I'm sure some of you have. But the first time you see it, it's like, golly gee, that's a tornado. And you don't think go to your safe place. So that's why you have to practice doing your tornado drill, is because then, as soon as it clicks in, you don't go into scared mode, you go into, oh, safe place. And you go right there as fast as you can. The only time I can think of that I was scared when a tornado was around, there was one going toward my parents' house about 6 years ago. And I was not on TV to where my parents could see. And so I was looking at the radar, and I realized that's going toward my parents' house. So I called them up, and I couldn't get a hold of them. I got a little scared. Most times when we're forecasting the weather, and we're talking about tornadoes, one of the good things about going through as much schooling as I've gone through, and I've had a lot of practice talking about tornadoes, is it's not something I usually think about. I'm always focused on, as opposed to being scared or worried, I'm focused on trying to get as much information out as possible before the tornado forms and before the tornado strikes. After the fact, when we had all the tornadoes about 2 years ago, I remember it was about 2 days later I sat down and it was just one of those, oh, if my wife had been here, if that had hit my house, and all of a sudden all that fear came, and I was like, oh geez, how lucky did I get personally, on that. So for whatever reason, I've been fortunate enough that that's the only situation where I got scared while it was happening, and it's because I couldn't control it. I couldn't get a hold of my parents. I couldn't tell them that it was coming toward them. But they were fine. The tornado ended up missing them. But my dad tells a story where he's looking out the window. It's one of those things he's looking at and he's like, that looks like a tornado. And he finds himself staring at it for about 10 seconds. He goes, that's a tornado. And then they take off from the basement. Because, let's be honest, who's seen a tornado on TV before? I think almost everyone here has seen a tornado on TV or a picture in a textbook, but very few of us have probably seen one in real life. I'm sure some of you have. But the first time you see it, it's like, golly gee, that's a tornado. And you don't think go to your safe place. So that's why you have to practice doing your tornado drill, is because then, as soon as it clicks in, you don't go into scared mode, you go into, oh, safe place. And you go right there as fast as you can. The only time I can think of that I was scared when a tornado was around, there was one going toward my parents' house about 6 years ago. And I was not on TV to where my parents could see. And so I was looking at the radar, and I realized that's going toward my parents' house. So I called them up, and I couldn't get a hold of them. I got a little scared. Most times when we're forecasting the weather, and we're talking about tornadoes, One of the good things about going through as much schooling as I've gone through, and I've had a lot of practice talking about tornadoes, is it's not something I usually think about. I'm always focused on, as opposed to being scared or worried, I'm focused on trying to get as much information out as possible before the tornado forms and before the tornado strikes. After the fact, when we had all the tornadoes about 2 years ago, I remember it was about 2 days later I sat down and it was just one of those, oh, if my wife had been here, if that had hit my house, and all of a sudden all that fear came, and I was like, oh geez, how lucky did I get personally, on that. So for whatever reason, I've been fortunate enough that that's the only situation where I got scared while it was happening, and because I couldn't control it, I couldn't get a hold of my parents, I couldn't tell them that it was coming toward them. But they were fine. The tornado ended up missing them, but my dad tells a story where he's looking out the window. It's one of those things, he's looking at it and he's like, that looks like a tornado. And he finds himself staring at it for about 10 seconds. He goes, that's a tornado. And then they take off from the basement. Because, let's be honest, who's seen a tornado on TV before? I think almost everyone here has seen a tornado on TV or a picture in a textbook, but very few of us have probably seen one in real life. I'm sure some of you have. But the first time you see it, it's like, golly gee, that's a tornado. And you don't think, go to your safe place. So that's why you have to practice doing your tornado drill, is because then, as soon as it clicks in, you don't go into scared mode, you go into, oh, safe place. And you go right there as fast as you can. Is that we are warmest usually on the surface of the earth, and we get cooler when you go up. You want to make a quick $5 for mom and dad? Listen to this. Okay. So, you're going to wait till summer to ask your mom and dad this question. Actually, you're going to make them a bet. You're going to walk up and say, I bet you $5 that I can go 5 miles from here, and it's below freezing. You go 5 miles straight up in the middle of summer, and it's below freezing. And I don't care if it's 110 here at the surface. You go 5 miles up, and it's below freezing. The reason that's the case is, believe it or not, there's more air right here at the ground than there is when you go up. It's the reason why when football teams go out to Colorado to play a football game, the team that's a visiting team is usually all out of breath, because there's actually less oxygen. There's less atmosphere the higher up that you go. So because there's more oxygen, there's more atmosphere at the surface, it absorbs the sunlight more. So even on the warmest day of the year, it's relatively cold when you go up above us. So you start talking about the cold air getting into your car, even in wintertime, or even in the summertime. A lot of that has to do with the way your car is able to, turn on the air conditioner. It actually removes the heat from using the liquid that circulates in your air conditioner to make it where it's cold, even during the summertime like that. Is that your question? Did I kind of answer that? Okay. Yes. Yes, that one time where I was too close to the dangerous storm, we watched it. The whole cloud was rotating, and I knew we were a little too close, but at least it was going, kind of parallel. I wasn't driving. Let's just say that if I were driving, we'd been about 2 miles farther away, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, it was rotating, and it spent about 3 or 4 minutes just rotating, and then all of a sudden, the what we call the rear flank downdraft. Now, I'll explain that in a second. Wraps around this thing, and the tornado just sets down. And you expect the tornado usually to be kind of thin or something when it starts and then grow. This was one, it just basically set down about a quarter mile wide, about a half mile away. Like it's about a quarter mile away. So, but yes, when it forms, it was really cool and incredibly scary because we were way too close. Which is why you should always be in a storm shelter. I mentioned a weird term a second ago. I said when the rear flank downdraft came around. When you're looking at radar, and like you're watching us on TV, and I'm standing there, usually I'm in front of a big red blob of something. And I'm saying something about this red blob, big red blob doing something, moving this direction, it's moving toward Tishomingo, need to get inside. What we're looking at when we're showing you radar is precipitation. That's all. So that precipitation is what the radar is getting reflected back to it. See, the radar actually has a dish that's scanning the sky every minute of every day. And so it's sending out radiation. But that radiation, if there's no clouds, no precipitation, that radiation just keeps going out in all directions. But when there's a thunderstorm, what happens is that radiation gets reflected back at the radar. So the heavier the thunderstorm, the more that reflects back, the brighter those colors that we show you on the air. So the big red blob is showing where rain is falling or hail is falling out of the thunderstorm. I mentioned that weird term, rear flank downdraft. That is the little hook echo you see on tornado thunderstorms. So when we're showing a thunderstorm, and we're like, see this little hook right there? Who knows what I'm talking about when I say that? Have you ever seen that? There's a little comma shape to the way a thunderstorm looks. I don't have a comma. Oh. That little comma shape, that little hook, is the air wrapping back out of the thunderstorm, because the thunderstorm's spinning, and it's wrapping back around and tries to produce the tornado, because they come from the spinning thunderstorm. If you've ever gone to the beach before, and you've been out there and you're looking out over the water and you're like, yeah, that's a tornado. We call it a water spout. And those water spouts form in a completely different way. You just happen to have air that's coming together the right direction, and a thunderstorm forms over a little boundary, and it forms a little water spout. Now listen, those water spouts can still hurt you. You want to go inside and stay away from them, but they're not likely to have 200-mile-per-hour winds. They might have 60-mile-per-hour winds. So those two type of thunderstorms, two type of tornadoes are called supercell thunderstorm and a land or a water spout tornado, depending on the forms of the land over top of water. And those typically aren't quite as dangerous as the ones that are supercell thunderstorms that move 60 miles per hour and have 200-mile-per-hour winds. Why does it rain most of the time? In this part of the country, we get a lot of rain. This is our rainy season this time of year. When we get into summertime, we have thunderstorms every day, but they might only be over top of your location 1 out of every 10 days. So this time of year, we get widespread rainfall because of something we call the jet stream. And it's a river of air in the atmosphere. Now, that might sound fishy because rivers can't be in the atmosphere. But this wind and the strong winds in the atmosphere bring quick-moving storm systems through that then use up the moisture because we're so close to the Gulf of Mexico, picks up that moisture and deposits here as rainfall. So this is the time of year where it rains all the time. It seems like it rains more than it's sunny. But then when we get into summertime, there might be thunderstorms every day, but they're not open quite as often because of that. We might try to get a couple a little farther back. Yes? Have a little bit of moist air, and you have that air rising. So when you have rising air, that's when clouds form. And the reason clouds form is clouds are made up of itsy-bitsy little water droplets. See, there are three forms of water can be in. It can be in a solid form, a liquid form, and a gas form. What grades do we start talking about that? Are we good? Are we good in like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade? Okay. Basically, these three forms of water water is always in one of these three forms. So when it's falling as snow, it's falling as solid water, or ice. When it's falling as raindrops, it's falling as liquid water. And then when it's in a gas form, you've all experienced this, you just don't realize it. Hot day during the middle of summer, and you're outside playing, even the girls get a little sweaty, right? The reason you get sweaty is because there's so much water vapor, or that gas form of water in the atmosphere, that your body sweats and the sweat doesn't evaporate. On a day that's less humid, you might be running around outside and you don't notice you're sweating. But believe it or not, you are. Because as that sweat forms on your body, you have little water droplets, and that water droplet evaporates. It changes from water to gas. And as it does, it actually makes you cooler. So believe it or not, sweating is what cools you down. So even as gross as it is, it's a good thing. I know the girls don't believe me, but whatever. So, getting back to your question, which you're going to repeat for me because I have the memory of a goldfish, but this was going somewhere. Was it one more time? Okay, so how come sometimes there aren't any clouds in the sky? Well, that's all with air going up. When air is going down, you can't get the water droplets to form because the air is sinking, and so there's no clouds to form. So when there's sinking air like this, usually we talk about high pressure, clouds don't form. When there's rising air, if there's moisture, clouds will form. Does that make sense? It's kind of the opposite of clouds forming. That's why I went the long way around for it. Yes? Okay. How do I know what's going to happen? Part of the way we do it, we mentioned the weather balloons that we send up. We take the information from those and from thermometers all over the world, and we put all of that data into what we call a model. And similar to the way you make a model airplane or build a model car so that you can look at what a Corvette looks like, because I'll be honest, I've owned a model Corvette. I've never owned an actual Corvette. Probably won't ever own an actual Corvette because you're all just don't make a lot of money. Let's not go there. So I know what a Corvette looks like. I know what it should look like. We take that information to construct a model of what the atmosphere should look like if obviously the information we have is correct. And so we use that information to project out what the forecast will be days in advance. First thing to know about weather models is they are always wrong. So the first thing a meteorologist does is try to figure out how is it wrong today? And why is it wrong today? Because both those things feed into it. So we use that, and we use all the knowledge we know about how clouds form, why tornadoes form, and we look at the patterns to say, okay, that pattern typically is associated with severe weather, with tornadoes, and that's how we make that forecast, 4, 5, 6 days out, and we look at that and say, that could be snowfall. I'm not saying a word. As a meteorologist, just so you know, if I know it's going to snow 7 days out, I'm going to tell you 2 days out. And the reason I'm going to do that is who likes snow? Exactly. So if I say it's going to snow, and it doesn't snow, do you like me? That weatherman! So just a heads up, usually if it's going to snow, I'm not going to tell you until 2 days out. Unless I'm really, 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 really sure. Which happens sometimes, but not very often around here. If we lived up in North Dakota, yeah, I could say 7 days out. This is Mississippi, I can't get away with that. That's a good question. Why do they call the middle of a tornado or a hurricane the eye? And the reason they call it the eye is back when they first put weather satellites up into the atmosphere, they took pictures of what the clouds looked like. When they looked at a hurricane, there was this little hole in the middle of it. Okay, well they knew that hole was there. But when they looked at it, sometimes it would look like that hole filled in. And so it kind of looked like it was an eye, blinking. And they looked at the different images. That's one of the reasons why. There's some other stories as to why they call it the eye. But that's just one of those name things that goes back a long, long ways. So that's always the more fun story to talk. Don't we start? I'll kick it. Okay, yeah, go ahead. So what's the difference between a hurricane and a tornado? A tornado forms in a small thunderstorm, typically only about 10 miles wide, which isn't small, but a hurricane can form on the order of more than 1,000 miles. So almost 100 times larger. So a hurricane can last for days. Even a weak hurricane can last for days as it moves throughout the ocean. So hurricanes are a lot longer lived. They cause a lot wider path of damage. But tornadoes typically cause more damage on a much more concentrated area, much short-lived. And one forms because of strong winds aloft, tornadoes do, and hurricanes form because there aren't strong winds aloft. So the extremes, if you have warm, moist air, give you different things, give you the different forms. That's a great question that I completely overlooked. The question was, how does lightning form? Who in here has created lightning before? Everybody raise your hand. Raise your hand. I'm talking to you. Everybody, you've all created lightning before. I promise you. Okay? I'll prove it to you. Okay. Little brother and sister, or maybe you're the little brother and sister. And you're walking around in the carpet, middle of winter time. It's kind of dry outside. You walk up. Hi, how are you? We call that static electricity. Has that ever happened before? Where you walk around and you get zapped? Or maybe you're in the covers and you hear that crackling sound. That's static electricity. That static electricity is the exact same thing as a lightning bolt. Granted, there's a lot more of it in a lightning bolt. You see, a lightning bolt forms because the same way that your feet are rubbing on the ground, or maybe your legs are rubbing on the inside of your sheets creating electricity, when you're rubbing and you're picking up that static electricity, it's like water droplets or hailstones within the thunderstorm. They rub up against one another, and they pick up that electricity. By the way, there's probably a little too much moisture to zap anybody today, so you might as well give up. But they rub against each other until they separate the charge to different parts of the thunderstorm, or between the thunderstorm and the ground, until they build it up so much it just can't take it, and you get the lightning bolt that happens. Now that lightning bolt, believe it or not, is 10 times hotter than the surface of the sun. Think about that for a second. Who's gotten a sunburn in the middle of the summer and you're like, oh, we're 93 million miles away from that bad boy. So, think about that. You're 93 million miles away from that thing and it's hot. So take the surface of that, if you're 93 million miles closer, times 10. That's how hot a lightning bolt is. Really, 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 really hot. 60,000 degrees. That's a 6 followed by 4 zeros? Is that right? Yeah. 6 followed by 4 zeros. Like I said, math is sort of my thing. So really hot, and that's the reason why it causes thunder. You see, you can't have thunder without a lightning bolt. See, the lightning bolt comes down and it hits the ground, it heats the atmosphere at 60,000 degrees. And when you heat something, it expands. So it causes the atmosphere to expand and then contract back in, making a thunder. Wow. Okay, so let's get it out of our system on 1, 2, 3. Okay. So, okay, you can stop clapping. Or you can always clap, that's okay. But we call it a thunderclap, and it's as the air rapidly expands and contracts back together, it causes the noise that you hear as thunder. Every single lightning bolt causes thunder. The thing is you don't always hear the thunder. For every mile away you are away from a lightning bolt, the sound will arrive 5 seconds later, because the speed of light is faster than the speed at which you can hear things, the speed of sound. So if you see a lightning bolt, you go, 1,001, 1,002, 1,003, then you know, 4 seconds, that's less than 1 mile away from you. If you count to 10, you know it's 2 miles away. 15, it's 3 miles away. And so you can tell how far away it is. If you count to 1 and it goes, wow, you know, really close. If you're close enough to hear thunder, you're close enough to get struck by lightning. Isn't that crazy? And believe it or not, we've had a lot of tornado questions here today. More people are killed by lightning every year than tornadoes and hurricanes combined. Ooh. Yeah. The reason for that is every single thunderstorm has lightning in it. It's in the name, thunderstorm. So, there's more opportunities to get struck by lightning. Do we have some baseball players in here? Softball players, maybe? Golfers? Basketball players? People that generally like to get outside during summer. Like to go to the beach and tan. If you fall into any of these categories, you're at risk of getting struck by lightning, because anytime there's a thunderstorm and you can hear the thunder, you can be struck. Lightning bolts can strike more than 15 miles away from a thunderstorm. Huh? Yeah, they can go a long ways away. So you want to make sure you get to someplace safe. And unlike what we mentioned a minute ago with tornadoes, any place inside is safe. Inside a car, you're safe. Not because of the rubber wheels, but because the car's made of metal. So maybe a convertible might not be quite as good. But as long as you have a hard top, you're in good shape. Because if your car gets struck by lightning, it'll actually direct electricity around you and into the ground. And the reason your tires don't protect you is because there'll actually be itsy-bitsy little pinholes in your tires from where the electricity from lightning went through the metal wheel and into the ground. So a lot of times they'll flatten the tires if your car gets struck by lightning. Cars don't get struck by lightning a lot because lightning strikes the tallest object. Usually there's a tree or something else just a little bit taller. But you never want to be the tallest object, because you don't have to be the tallest object for a mile, you just have to be the tallest object for a few feet. So you always want to stay inside with the lightning, right? No matter how much fun you're having, how good your tail is. Good question, very good question, something I completely overlooked. What's the heaviest raindrop that's ever been seen or picked up? I'll tell you, I don't know, and I don't know if anybody knows. Part of the reason for that is raindrops get to a certain size, a little bit less than the size of a dime. It actually might be slightly smaller than that. When they get to a certain size, they have a tendency to break apart, because they're falling fast enough that the raindrop would actually break apart. So typically raindrops don't get very big. Now something else that falls from the cloud gets pretty big, and that's hail. Hail is ice that forms in a thunderstorm. The reason it forms is the same way you're all going to make $5 this summer when you bet your parents. Because when a raindrop gets thrown high enough into a thunderstorm, that raindrop can freeze. And that frozen raindrop, as it gets heavy enough, starts to fall out of the thunderstorm. As it falls down out of the thunderstorm, it crosses over to an area that's back above freezing. So we're warmer close to the surface, and it adds a coat of water. And as the thunderstorm picks it back up, that coat of water freezes. Another coat of water freezes. A coat of water freezes. And that hailstone grows bigger and bigger and bigger. And in some cases, they can be massive. Trust you, hailstone this big coming 100 miles per hour will knock out anybody in this room. It's been known to kill cattle. Which means they could probably take you out too. They don't happen, we don't get hail this big around here. Typically our hail is less than an inch in size. But we have had cases even within the last month of hail that was in excess of 2 inches pretty close to here, which is about the size of an egg, a hen's egg, that you might have had for breakfast. Hail can form that big around here. So that hail, believe it or not, if you cut through a hailstone, you'll actually see little rings in it, kind of like the rings in a tree. So you'll know how many times it was thrown up into the thunderstorm and how many times it go through it. It's kind of a neat thing to check out if hail ever forms. Now you want to go out after the hail stops, and after lightning stops, and after the tornadoes come through. Because I'll tell you this, if the tornado is going to hit you, usually it doesn't happen on the front side of a thunderstorm. Usually it happens after the strong winds and after it's rained. They typically happen on the back side of a thunderstorm. So if you're looking at a dark cloud coming at you, and it's the middle of summer, and all of a sudden you're looking up, that's a dark, low-hanging cloud. That's hanging really low on the front of that thunderstorm. Usually that's strong winds, but it's not usually a tornado. The tornado usually comes after. You've heard the calm during the storm, or the calm before the storm. When you hear all the noise, and then it goes calm, you're actually the part of the thunderstorm where things are going back up into the thunderstorm, because things can't fall down if they're going up. And where things are going up into the thunderstorm, that's where the tornado is. That was about 6 questions asked. Answer for your one. Yes. Go to school to become a meteorologist. I went to school all the way through elementary school, middle school, high school. I went to 4 years of college, and I got my degree in meteorology. You can go back for your master's degree if you want to, which would be another 2 years, or another 4 years if you wanted to teach meteorology, or there's certain places where that's important. To be a television meteorologist, you need 4 years of meteorology in college, and then I worked for free at television stations while I was in college for about 3 years. So I essentially got about double the education because of that. A lot of what I learned, frankly, I learned more almost about weather from teaching while I was in college than I even did from my classes, because you learn from teaching very quickly what people do and don't understand. For my job, that's important, because even if I'm the smartest meteorologist on the planet, if no one understands what I'm saying, I'm not doing anybody any good. So that was a very good question. 4 years of college after grade school, middle school, high school, become a meteorologist. There's a lot of math and science. A lot of math and science. The question was, does metal attract lightning? It doesn't necessarily attract lightning, but it conducts it very well. Just kind of like the power lines outside, even though they're covered in rubber on the outside, inside that rubber is metal. Because metal conducts electricity, it allows electricity to move very efficiently. So anything metal allows electricity to move through it. So a flagpole, because it's made of metal, would allow electricity to move through it. They put metal spikes on the top of buildings, not to attract it, but in case lightning were to strike, it would be the tallest object, and then it would strike that metal object, and usually there's a wire attached to that metal object that leads to the ground. So that way, if the house gets struck, or if the building gets struck, it gets it to the ground, as opposed to striking the top of the house and starting it on fire, if that makes sense. So metal doesn't necessarily attract it, but a lot of times we put metal poles out. In case it were to happen, it would be the tallest object, if that makes sense. Okay, so if you're at the bottom two hills, or maybe in a valley, is it likely that the tornado will hop over you, or will it go all the way down? I'll tell you that it could go either way. There's some new research that says that, theoretically, they've always kind of thought this, that it might actually enhance the ability of a tornado to pick up as it's going down a hill. And the reason for that is it makes the thunderstorm stretch. And as it stretches the rotation, it causes it to spin up. It's the same reason why if you have rotating chairs at home, a fun little trick to play is if you spin in the chair, and we've all spun in a chair before. Who hasn't spun? Who's spun in a chair before? Let's not do who hasn't. Who's spun? Okay, we've all spun in a chair. Okay, you spin in a chair, and I get dizzy really easily, so I'm going to have to stop, and we'll play pretend. So if you spin in a chair, and you stick your arms out, you'll go at a certain speed, and then you pull them in, and you'll actually rotate faster. So while your arms are out, it's a little bit slower, and you pull it in, and faster. And the reason that happens is because you're actually spinning up. It's something we call the conservation of. Let's not get that. Anyway, it causes you to spin faster. And so as tornadoes go down a hill, you can sometimes cause them to strengthen. So whether you're on top of the hill or at the bottom of the hill, it doesn't matter. A lot of people think, oh, I live next to this hill, or I live next to a mountain, I'm protected, or I live next to a body of water. Tornadoes can happen, especially in this part of the country, and have happened almost everywhere. Good question. How does a tornado move? One of the things about tornadoes, and the reason why you don't want to chase them, is they don't always move in a straight line. Now, most roads don't go in a straight line. They go straight for a little bit and they kind of wiggle and wobble. Well, because tornadoes can move 60 or 70 miles per hour, and they might be moving in a straight line, it's very difficult to stay in front of it. It's the reason why if you're trying to run away from a tornado, you're probably in bad shape. Like you want to get to a safe place, either get to a storm shelter or a sturdy building if possible, so that you can stay away from it. Because tornadoes move very, very fast a lot of times. 60 miles per hour is 1 mile every minute, which is really fast. So they can move erratically. Sometimes they move in a straight line, and you never know which time it's going to be, especially even if you're out chasing them. As a meteorologist, it's very difficult to tell.
How far can a tornado go in a day?
One more time?
How far can a tornado go in a day?
How far can a tornado go in one day? There have been tornadoes that have stayed on the ground more than 200 miles. And there have been thunderstorms that have produced multiple tornadoes for more than 300 miles. So they can go a long, long way in a day. When we had, I can't remember the exact statistic from a couple years ago, but there was a tornado that was on the ground for, I think, more than, off and on the ground. Like it'd be on the ground, it'd lift up a little bit and touch back down for a better part of around 8 hours as it was moving, 60 miles per hour. So it was moving very fast and very far. So that's, they can last a long time. Usually for you, if you're part of that tornado though, it might only be over top of you 60 seconds or less. It might only affect you in 20, 30 seconds. And that's why they're so dangerous, is because they are so quick. Last question. Say again? The question was, does the makeup of your house, does the materials it's made out of, help to protect you? And it can. But more than anything, you want to make sure that you put as many walls between you and the outside as possible. If you put one wall, okay. If you put two walls, that's better. If you put maybe three walls, that's a lot better shape. And certainly, the stronger your house is, it makes a difference. If your house is made out of solid concrete, you're going to be a lot safer than if your house is made up of wood. But more than anything, you want to make sure to put a couple of layers between you and the outside as possible, if you can. And the stronger your house is, the better. And it's part of the reason we talk about, wanting to, on those tornado days, those 3 or 4 days a year where tornadoes possible, get out of the mobile home, is because typically they're not as well constructed and the wind can get under them. So then in that case, the makeup of a house makes a difference. But the more walls, whether it's a house, whether it's school, that you put between you and the outside, the better. Well, thank you so much for having me come and talk to you all today. You've been excellent listeners, and I want to give you guys a round of applause. So, and I'm going to take a video of you if I can, and I'm going to take it so you can show it on the news. Does that sound okay?